for sticking with us for the entire program today. I think we saved hopefully one of the most exciting topics that I think many of us are here for. And this session is called the high-level panel on the Localizing Adaptation Finance for community-led climate mobility solutions. It's a topic that really close to our heart. With President Whips and other champion leaders, 2024, we launched a facility in New York, September 2024, and since then, we've been supporting communities in 7 countries with 24 projects. And so it's a topic that's close to our heart. How do you localize adaptation finance? How do you enable community-led adaptation? And the GCCM has been at the center of this work for a while. So on that, I'd like to invite His Excellency, President Ranjao Whips of Palau. He's our dear friend and dear champion leader. He was one of the 5 champion leaders who launched our CCAF facility in September 2024. So I'd like to invite the president here and to the lectern. And yeah, yes. Thank you, sir.
It's been a long afternoon. Sure, everybody's excited to get to dinner, but just this last topic. Well, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, Palau is pleased to open this vital discussion about localizing adaptation finance for community-led climate mobility solutions. For small island developing states like Palau, climate mobility is not merely about movement, it's about agency. It is about ensuring that communities have the resources, knowledge, and capacity to make informed choices about their future, to be able to stay on their ancestral lands, adapt in place, and be prepared for the worsening climate impacts. Too often, climate finance remains distant from communities that confront these impacts every day. And the funding processes can be complex and too slow and inaccessible. Yet, it is the local communities that best understand their vulnerabilities, their priorities, and solutions. So, redefining climate finance, the CCAF impact, that is why Palau strongly supports localized climate finance that places resources directly in the hands of communities through the community's climate adaptation facility, which has been advanced by the Global Center for Climate Mobility. And we are already seeing how relatively modest but rapid investments can generate meaningful adaptation outcomes while strengthening local ownership. And I want to share 3 examples of these that are actually going on in Palau on the ground right now. The first, we saw a video this morning, was about the Ngesal watershed project. And this is really reviving a system that was in place in the past. And at this time when we're facing El Niños, where we need water, it is critical that we have these resources restored and empower our youth to make those changes and improve our freshwater resources. The second project is in another part of Palau. where the local youth are getting together and using nature-based solutions, constructing culverts, building seawalls, and really protecting infrastructure along vulnerable shorelines. And the last one has to do with our island up to the north, which is very climate exposed and vulnerable. And in that community, there's a grant to help them really to secure their boats, their livelihoods when storms come, with the equipment that helps them restore those, or protect those important resources that they need. You know, these projects may appear small in scale, but they illustrate one important lesson. Communities do not always need large and complex interventions. What they need is timely, flexible, and accessible financing that allows them to implement solutions they have already identified. That is why Palau, together with our allies in AOSIS and the Coalition for Addressing Sea Level Rise and its Existential Threats, CSET, is calling for an ambitious UN declaration on sea level rise. Our proposal is clear. We must allocate 1% of the contributions to international climate finance directly to affected communities. Palau welcomes the development of the Climate Mobility Adaptation Agenda as a vital opportunity to prioritize locally led adaptation, direct community access to finance, and long-term resilience planning. We encourage the development partners, climate funds, and financial institutions to expand flexible grant mechanisms that can rapidly reach the frontline communities and empower local decision-making. Communities must not be passive recipients of adaptation interventions. They must be leaders in shaping their own future. And it speaks to the absolute necessity of the... And in Palawan, we like to say, Aimath el-Lodersi, Aimalaaf el-Lodersi, which means a hand extended. When a hand is extended, another is extended to reach back. And this speaks to the absolute necessity of mutual respect and cooperation. If our international partners extend their hands with flexible, localized financing, our frontline communities will reach back with their solutions, their hard work, and the resilience needed to safeguard our collective future. By localizing climate finance, we strengthen resilience, preserve agency, and help ensure that mobility remains a choice rather than a necessity. Oman Msula, thank you. Danke schön.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to now invite Ms. Chiara Lorenzini, with whom I've worked in the past year and a half, almost 100 hours a week together, to launch the facility and now have some 26 grants currently going on, to give some context of what we're doing. Chiara?
Okay. Thank you, Jan. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your presence. Today I'm honored, as Jan mentioned, to share the tangible impacts of the Community's Climate Adaptation Facility, so the CCAF, showcasing community-led rapid response adaptation. This run-through, you'll see, won't probably do justice to all the details of these important projects, but it will allow you to appreciate how the CCAF turns climate resilience into reality. So CCAF is currently supporting 24 communities in 7 countries in the Pacific and in the greater Caribbean region. So 3 of those are in Fiji. We start with the first one, the Makwati Vai Community Project, which restores critical water infrastructure, housing, and it procures a boat to ensure that sustainable marine transportation, so as to enable the voluntary return of families displaced due to sea level rise. The following 2 projects have similar scope. So the Narata Community Project, focusing on relocating vulnerable households situated just a few meters away from eroding riverbank to a safer, higher land. Similarly, the Vunio Drovu Community Project, this is due to relocation is due to exposed households to recurring flash floods. Here you can see the picture of the groundbreaking ceremony that was completed. So I moved to Palau, and I take the opportunity as well to thank the President Whip's office for leadership and support in the process of the National Selection Committee. I will go maybe fast because the President already described better than me and with the right pronunciation these projects. So the Coral State Youth Council, so the watershed, with the, you can see the youth working in cleaning, busy cleaning activities. The Kanyangel community, so to construct a boat ramp to protect the fishing community, and the youth project to erosion control. So we move to St. Kitts and Nevis, where we have 4 ongoing projects here. We have the first one from Mr. Adelando Levine. So there is a farming project that will benefit different communities by establishing an innovative, integrated hydroponics and heat-tolerant quail system to enhance adapted climate-resilient production. And in this way, they will reduce food import dependence. The second one we want to show you is the Capistrano Community Project, which deploys engineered artificial reef, sensor-equipped monitoring buoys, and jet extension to protect coastal livelihoods from marine ecosystem degradation. The third one is relates to the Sandy Point community, which construct a solar-powered rainwater harvesting and storage system to provide reliable water access during, unfortunately, increasing prolonged droughts. And the fourth one, you've seen a video this morning as well on the Newcastle Bay Community Project that renovates the deteriorating fisher shelters with solar lighting, structural stability, to safeguard local equipment during severe hurricanes, and also to improve the fishing livelihood activities of the community. We quickly move to Tuvalu. I know it's a lot. We have 5 projects in Tuvalu. Some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger. We start with the Vaitupu Community Project, which aims at building a water cistern to secure emergency reserves and ensure year-round fresh water availability for women, children, vulnerable groups. This is built close to a church, which is the gathering place for the community. The second one is Lofegai Community Project, aiming at retrofitting the Mail Island Community Hall with structural repairs and flood-safe sanitation, so as to guarantee secure, including emergency evacuation centers, shelters as well. The Kaupule Community Project ensures a multi-purpose 4x4 tractor to establish a rapid post-disaster clearance of roads, beaches, and for the collection of waste, and to quickly restore infrastructures and services after hurricanes, cyclones hitting the island. The Nui Community Project installs dedicated water tanks at the recently inaugurated island's women's market, alongside household filtration systems to protect women-led economic activities. And last but not least, the New Tao Community Project constructs an inclusive climate resilience multipurpose center that serves both as an emergency shelter and a hub for women's livelihood training. We go finally to Vanuatu, our fifth country, currently implementing projects. We have two projects that are similar in scope. So the Akam Community Project implements a hybrid coastal defense system combining gabion baskets and native planting to mitigate displacement risks due to severe erosion. This is similar for the Makira community, where we also have a community-led inland resettlement planning, so the community deciding and discussing about this resettlement. And last, the project implemented by the Lamak Climate Change Association Committee, which is a multi-community project aiming at retrofitting 7 existing community spaces into cyclone-proof evacuation shelters, featuring upgraded water and sanitation facilities. So, as you can see, CCAF is designed really to move fast and to reach the communities. We aim, in general, to complete call for proposals in between 30 and 90 days from the publishing of the call. By the end of 2026, we will scale up to more than 27 projects across 10 countries. We currently have 2 active call for proposals that will close next week. One in Maldives and one in Belize. And I take the opportunity to thank the Ministry Habet in advance, and we look forward to revise the call for proposal with you next week during our National Selection Committee meeting. Furthermore, in the second half of the year, we're planning to launch a new call for proposal for 3 African countries. We are also launching the CCAF Plus, so we are introducing blended finance, loans and guarantees to unlock private capital for climate resilience small and medium enterprises. So this project, I think, proved that when we invest directly in community ownership, local knowledge, and resilient infrastructure, we don't just mitigate climate risks, we protect livelihoods, preserve cultures, and indeed, we build a sustainable future. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Chiara. I'd like to invite the moderator for the panel and the panelists as well. We have moderator Mr. Samer Saliba, Acting Executive Director of the Mayor's Migration Council. I'd like to also invite Excellency Masouda Bam Mohamed Lagdaf, Minister of Environment for the Islamic Republic of Mauritania. His Excellency Orlando Habit, Minister of Sustainable Development, Climate Change and Solid Waste Management for Belize. Mr. Ibrahima Sheikh Diong, the Executive Director of the Loss and Damage Fund, the FRLD. I would like to invite Ms. Trudy Morgan, President of the Commonwealth Engineering Council and UN Habitat Project Lead. Great. And then, yeah, Summer, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jan. It's a pleasure to be here. For those who don't believe in climate change, we should just invite them to this room at this very moment, and maybe their opinions will be changed. I have the distinct pleasure of being your last panel and hosting your last panel before you and drinks. So I promise to make this as quick as I possibly can, but I do appreciate everybody's patience and attention. As we talk about the most important thing when it comes to climate action, which is money and funding, because we can't do any of the work that we need to do without the resources to do it. So without further ado, I'm going to turn to this excellent panel that we have in front of us with two local leaders from two very different countries to speak to their own experiences about leveraging resources to enact the work that they need to address climate migration and support those in need in their own countries, before turning it to the executive director of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage to hear a little bit more about how we can get more money to those local actors who are dealing with this crisis head on. Her Excellency Masouda Bam Mohamed Lagdaf, I'd like to start with you, if I may. Mauritania faces some of the most complex and overlapping climate mobility pressures in the world, from coastal erosion, desertification, and drought, all simultaneously displacing communities. How are you in Mauritania working to ensure that adaptation finance actually reaches the communities making the hardest decisions about their futures? And what needs to change, particularly for those who have the power to change it, the way that international climate finance is structured and delivered to you and to your constituents to make that funding actually possible?
Merci, Monsieur le modérateur. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs. La Mauritanie est effectivement confrontée à une situation de mobilité climatique et humaine d'une grande complexité. En effet, nous faisons face simultanément à la désertification, à la sécheresse récurrente, à la dégradation des terres, à la raréfaction des ressources en eau et à l'érosion côtière qui fragilise la subsistance de nos communautés. Et en même temps, notre pays se trouve au cœur de la dynamique de la mobilité. Aujourd'hui, la Mauritanie accueille plus de 160 000 réfugiés dans la région de l'Est. Environ 120 000 sont dans les camps, dans le camp de Mberre, et 40 000 réfugiés vivant au sein des communautés d'accueil dans l'Est, le centre et au sud du pays. Cette réalité est également une forme de solidarité avec les pays voisins. En effet, les communautés hôtes partagent leurs terres, leurs ressources, leurs services essentiels avec les populations déplacées. Mais elles reflètent aussi une pression croissante sur les ressources naturelles des communautés déjà très vulnérables. Cette situation nous enseigne une leçon. Lorsque l'adaptation n'est pas suffisamment financée en amont, le coût humain et social des déplacements deviennent beaucoup plus élevés en aval. Et pour la Mauritanie, la mobilité climatique n'est pas perçue comme une conséquence des crises, elle ne doit pas être perçue comme une conséquence des crises, elle doit être intégrée dans les stratégies globales d'adaptation permettant aux populations de conserver leur capacité de choix. En effet, notre CDN, notre contribution déterminée nationale 3.0, pour la période 2025-2035, intègre cette approche. Et son plan d'investissement est en cours d'élaboration avec l'appui du Programme national des Nations Unies. Et il fait de la thématique de la mobilité humaine l'un des piliers de cette structure de financement pour la CDN 3.0. Et des actions concrètes seront conçues avec toutes les parties prenantes au fin de répondre de manière très appropriée aux attentes des communautés vulnérables face au changement climatique. Donc, pour ce qui est du financement, nous recevons un ensemble de financements de la part des fonds de finances climatique. Le gouvernement mauritanien lui-même finance en grande partie ces problèmes de mobilité. En l'occurrence, les populations que nous recevons de la part des pays voisins, dont je viens d'évoquer tout de suite, les 160 000 réfugiés qui sont en Mauritanie. Le gouvernement déjà finance leur prise en charge entière en matière d'éducation, de résilience, de prise en charge localement. Et on compte faire avoir des solutions innovantes en matière de mobilisation de la finance pour être souverain et pour être autonome. En l'occurrence, des fonds ou des facilités qui peuvent être locales, financées en partie par les fonds propres du gouvernement mauritanien et avec des apports éventuels de la part de l'aide bilatérale, de la finance bilatérale et aussi des financements multilatéraux, toujours en prenant en considération le principe sacré du principe pollueur-payeur. En effet, nos États ne font que subir l'action des autres pays. Donc notre part dans les émissions à gaz à effet de serre est infime. Elle ne représente rien, alors que nous subissons de plein fouet les impacts des autres pays ayant produit énormément de gaz à effet de serre qui font qu'il y a des impacts directs, c'est en matière de changement climatique, en matière de sécheresse, en matière de rehaussement du niveau de mer, etc. Je vous remercie.
Merci, merci, madame. Fantastic. It's similar, I should mention, similar to GCCM, the Mayor's Migration Council, we manage our own Global Cities Fund for migrants and refugees, where we directly grant city governments on issues relating to migration and displacement. And I'm very happy to have received an application from Nouakchott, actually, to support not just climate migrants, but refugees who are in the capital city with green spaces, nature-based solutions, and places to interact, really changing the very landscape of Nouakchott, the capital of Mauritania. So it's great to know that they have I know the city and the state have your support as well. Maybe moving from a somewhat dry country to a less dry, a very green country. I haven't had the pleasure to visit, but His Excellency Orlando Habet, Belize is a country with deep biodiversity and indigenous communities who have deep relationships to their land. I know that's been talked about so many times. I think every dignitary that stood up here has said the right to stay is actually the main principle that we should focus on first and foremost. But obviously that takes measures of mitigation and adaptation that require funding and financing to realize. So for you in Belize, what finance mechanisms have you found to best support that locally led adaptation, to support community agency and perhaps protect that cultural heritage that's so important to your community?
Surely, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good afternoon, everyone, once again. Yes, I thank you for that question because really and truly it speaks to the heart of what we are currently living in Belize. And like many countries, we have various sources of funding, very little coming from national budget, but we get some funding, certainly, but what has worked for us, apart from grant funding, we have certainly capacity building, which is important for us. So either it comes directly as capacity building or funding for capacity building, which is very instrumental. But sometimes, as you know, we get those concessional loans and other guaranteed loans. And for us, one that has worked for us recently since 2022 is a debt for nature swap. We heard what Seychelles did a few years before, and then we went in 2022 and we did the largest debt for nature swap. But it didn't last for too long because about 2 years later, I think Ecuador tapped us and went to the larger debt for nature swap. But from that nature swap, what we did was we instituted a trust along with the private sector that is called apart from the Blue Bond, that is called the Belize Fund for Sustainable Development. And in that fund, there's money going in there that within 40 years can come up to about $360 million. And from there, we use funding to assist with some of those adaptation projects. Also, we have established, just a week ago, celebrated 30 years of existence, our Protected Areas Conservation Trust. So from there, what happens is that we get a small portion of the exit taxes from all the tourists that goes to that trust. And it is basically for funding co-management of our protected areas. We have 103 protected areas. We have 26 in co-management. And so that assists in co-managing those protected areas. And they also assist in funding other activities for adaptation. One such example is in the northern part of Belize, we have an old fishing village called Sarteneja, almost close to the border with Mexico. They were stopped some years ago through, their fishing was through drag net fishing, which is unsustainable. And Oceana went in and said, listen, you can't continue doing that anymore. They had a moratorium and that was stopped. So now they have to do artisanal fishing. But they are also prone to forest fires. So through the PACT fund and the Belize fund, they got some $10 million to purchase equipment for a sub-project, which was one, to buy equipment to have their own fire brigade and to refurbish a community building. This came from the community itself and the village council to refurbish this building, and now it serves as the hub during disaster risk management. So it speaks directly to when the community gets activated. Certainly, the Green Climate Fund is also one that also flows through Belize and goes through PACT because PACT is accredited to the Green Climate Fund and also to the Adaptation Fund. And we have in Belize, as you mentioned, culture, heritage, especially from the Mayan indigenous people in the southern part of Belize. And they have recently, along with our support, applied for a $40 million project through the Green Climate Fund. And it has been approved. Hopefully it becomes effective next year. And what they're doing is in their communities, they have 31 established communities, currently looking at how they can establish the rights to their lands, to their traditional lands. And they want to see how they can improve agriculture for it to be resilient for them. Because normally they have done slash and burn, which is not very good. 2 years ago, a large forest fire, and because the communities are within the forest itself, the fire went from the forest into their homes and burned over 30 homes. And this year, early this year, another 19 homes were burned with another forest fire. Unfortunately, we have a tree that is called the copal tree, has a resin. They use it for a rubbing compound, but it also burns like gasoline, so it's there. But this is very important because now this is community-led, indigenous-led, and they will be managing these funds. We also have, for example, the use of blended finance. So through the funding coming from the Green Climate Fund, going into the Development Finance Corporation and with the Belize Fund, serving as a guarantor for over 300 loans for fisher folks. And normally, before this establishment of this fund, they will have to go to loan sharks to get loans at maybe 35, 40%, which is really unsustainable. They can't pay it back. But now with this fund, they can get monies at single-digit rates, and so they can pay it back. And it might sound like charity, but it is not. Remember, the fisher folks now had to give up all that marine space that they used to fish for us to now be able to commit globally our 30% of marine space for conservation by 2030. And I'm proud to say that hopefully by the end of this year, 2026, we might achieve that 30%, if not by early next year.
Excellent.
Yes. And so we also have the challenges certainly that we have with trying to get funding for other areas, but you can also see how you can channel other funds. For example, we still have funding from our GF6 through the Global Environment Facility, which we are currently using some of that funding to assist communities that live along the Belize River, which is a long river going from west to east into the ocean. And so they will be doing some restoration activities, trying to see how they can implement the early warning systems, because for some reason, if a hurricane doesn't hit Belize every year, it stays close by long enough to spread a lot of rains and causing major floods. So the slower the hurricane, the worse it is for us if it doesn't hit, right? But so those are things that can be done. Certainly, we have our application. I was telling the chairman about our application for the fund for loss and damage, which we recently submitted, and we hope it is approved. And that is coming really from large consultation with communities across the country. So if that money comes in, then it is funding that comes in for adaptation funding that they can use for their activities across. I also want to mention that many times when you get funding, even from international funding, whether it's JEF or the Green Climate Fund, it goes through other agencies, and the process for getting these monies takes too long. So some of these activities, when you do your estimates, by the time you actually get the fund 4 or 5 years later, the costs have already increased tremendously, so you can't really implement it. So, but by going maybe, if you can't go directly to the communities, to the agencies, then to organizations such as PACT and the Belize Fund, which are local and can channel the monies easily. And then further extend it, if those don't work, then look at what happens regionally, like institutions like the Caribbean Development Bank, who know the people in the Caribbean, know the situation and issues that we have. For example, right now, we have been devastated by sargassum across the country, across the region, and there's no end to it, and really no real solution to sargassum.
Excellent, thank you, Minister. I want to, you really, please. It sounds like you're hedging your bets in a lot of different ways. You mentioned grant funding, concessional loans, debt swaps, and then blended finance through the Green Climate Fund. I want to particularly call out what stood out to me is the bringing in the private sector on land trusts, it sounded like, because I think we all know the value of land. But because there is value in land, there's also value in protecting land. And this one provocation that made me think about actually bringing in the private sector, not to develop land, but to protect it as well. So thank you for all those different examples. I think it's great to see that you are again, hedging your bets in so many different ways. We'll turn now to Mr. Ibrahima Sheikh Diong, the Executive Director of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. And Mr. Diong, if you don't want to make a public announcement on the status of Belize's proposal, I'll ask you a different question to point you in another direction. But obviously we all know about the fund and how it represents a historic commitment. I think everybody in this room has an ask for you, myself included, but I'll save that for later. But a gap still remains that the commitment and finance actually reaching frontline communities remains. And particularly, this is related to my ask, cities and city governments only having access to 3 to 5% of global adaptation financing. And we hope from the Mayor's Migration Council and the C40 city side that the Loss and Damage Fund can address that. But beyond our asks, this whole room's asks, we'd like to hear from you first. How is the fund working to close that gap and shift the center of gravity towards locally accessible and flexible funding financing mechanisms, perhaps not just at the national level, but as we saw also at the city or community level as well?
Well, thank you. And I wish I could make a breaking news for Belize. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I tried. I'm trying,
Belize.
Minister.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I know we're about to have a drink, but at least good afternoon to all of you. Just stay comfortable. I'm going to speak for 2 hours. Since I'm talking about finance. But let me, before I get to your question, I want to recognize a number of people in this room, mostly activists for 3 decades, have been making the case time and time again about the sense of urgency, the need for a fund called Respond to Loss and Damage, but more importantly, the human face of loss and damage. So if you bear with me, I wanted you to give them a big round of applause for the contribution they provide to the fund. I think we've demonstrated to this fund the power of global solidarity. Indeed, some of us were at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. Many of us thought we can actually walk away from the COP with no decision on having a fund dedicated to loss and damage. And the fact that we're able to do it, indeed, demonstrate when we come together what we can achieve as a community. So now the big question is, how do we use the global solidarity to take it to the next miles? And that is to make it successful. I want to make 4 points. Number one is the approach. How is this fund trying to be different in the way we approach loss and damage or climate finance in general? One thing that we value at the fund, it's not just a slogan. When we say country-led, country-owned as a way of supporting countries, because we strongly believe, as we heard from Belize and from Mauritania, it is up to the countries to identify and define and state what they need as opposed to those who are providing the funding. So we're not a supply-driven institution, we're a demand-driven institution. So therefore, if you look at our current call for proposal, the government themselves have to decide what exactly they want to get funding for, and that is extremely important because that sense of ownership, in our view, that is the starting point for any support that you can provide to be sustainable in loss and damage. Now, connecting this to the communities, and a question we get asked quite often, to what extent the government's actually working with communities in identifying the needs, and eventually, during the implementation, and making sure the communities are involved in the implementation because they're in the front line. So if you look at our funding request today, it is stated clearly that we encourage government themselves in identifying the needs to work with the communities, so what come forward. It is not just what the government wants to do, but it's also what the communities who are involved actually want to do as well. So I hope we'll keep that approach as we scale up the work of the fund to the extent that what we supply, what we're supporting, is really guided what the countries need. And that's the approach that we're trying to do differently, and which I hope will lead us to actually supporting what the countries need. Second, what are the financial instruments that we're using to make sure we can provide support to countries? Now, at the fund, we're doing a couple of things what I've thought is quite innovative, and I think some of the board members who are in this room will confirm what I'm about to say. For a number of years, many countries were actually complaining about the direct access to government when it came to funding. So for the first time in the climate finance world, we've actually agreed within our board to have a direct baggage support to government without having to actually to go through the partners or go through some of the access entities, and that is something that's never been done before. And the reason why it wasn't done is because many people in our community were concerned about the risk that's involved in doing their package support. But what we've done, we've come up with a risk mitigation whereby it is possible. So meaning that the fund was created with the intention of saying it's not just because it hasn't been done before that we can exploit. And I think that level of innovation shows that we're trying to make sure that the funding gets where it's needed. Now, the big question that we get asked quite often, what are you doing directly, for example, with the communities in terms of just funding going to the communities? Now, there is a commitment within our board, and I see some of the observers in the room, eventually to have a similar grant program that's going actually to the communities because they're in the front line. Now, you will agree with me, we're still trying to figure out the best way to do this in the sense many organizations have tried a similar grant program. It can be cumbersome, it can be tedious, doesn't necessarily mean it can't be done. But there's a lot to be done in learning from who have done it successfully and make sure when we get involved at FRLD, we do it actually successful, money can get to where it is. I think the challenge there, obviously, is that just because you move money from A to B, it doesn't necessarily mean it actually gets to B. And that's why I like some of those were saying earlier today, maybe the answer to get a tracking system whereby when the money actually moves from FRLD going to a country, we can be sure that the money actually has gone to where it's intended for. And I think the last thing I wanted to say, and this is something that's very important in our line of work, loss and damage cannot afford a delayed response to the problem you're trying to address. If the money comes too late, it defeats the purpose. That's why rapid response, knocking down the bureaucracy, accessibility, and making sure that the whole process is nimble, is facilitated. That is the approach that we're taking, whereby when money is actually provided, nothing stands on the way to providing the funding where it's needed. Look, I had the opportunity to visit Barbados, Jamaica, Africa. I've seen the impact of flood, of drought, of hurricane, the faces of the people who are affected. To me, if that kind of experience does not motivate you as a fund to go faster, better, to make money get to where it's needed, I don't see anything that can motivate you. So at the fund, we are trying to the best of our ability to make sure this fund is different in the way we provide support. Now, one information I want to provide. As of today, we got $820 million pledge from 27 contributors. Half of that has been released, about $440 million. And that's the reason why we decided to launch our early intervention, $250 million, with the intention of learning some of the lessons in terms of how we get this right. And the intention is, from that early intervention, once we get to the level where the fund is highly capitalized in the billions, we know what not to do, but more importantly, we learn some of the lessons from this early intervention to make sure that what I call the AAA of climate finance. It has to be accessible, it has to be available, it has to be affordable. So those who have not contributed to climate change, as the Minister of Maritime has stated earlier, have access to the resources to respond. And to me, it's important to leave you with one message. There's a human face of climate change. We talk about people's dignity. There's no time to waste. The sense of urgency should be felt by all of us and make sure that what we provide gets to where it's needed so no one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jiang. I think I really appreciate the highlighting the urgency and not just getting money out, but getting money out quickly, accessible, available, and affordable, as you said. And I think the 250 million early intervention window is quite a welcome. Just one follow-up question. Do you have that money on you now? It would be quite quick to just get it out to all the countries in the room right here, that you take it home and start interviewing.
I mean, if you ask, did I bring my checkbook? No, I did not bring my checkbook. The way the fund basically works, and this is a very important question.
Yes.
The trustee of the fund is the World Bank. So what that means, when contributions are actually provided, they accept the contribution on behalf of the fund. So as of today, the $440 million out of the $820 million that has been pledged, indeed, it is in the bank account of the fund. So the way it works, in the early intervention, if the board decide what to fund, the next step will be for the trustee and the country to sign a funding agreement, and the money is actually released immediately, going to the fund. So there's no, again, I underscore the importance of urgency. Rapid response to loss and damage is the reason this fund was created. We did not create it to do something business as usual. We're created to be different, and that is how this fund is run all the time. So yes, I did not bring my checkbook, but the money is available.
Thank you. I appreciate that extra insight. So we're about to close. I do want to ask one last, it's actually a provocation of our two ministers here, if I may. And it's going to be very brief because you see the clock in front of us. This is about to be game show time here to close us out before the reception. So I have a reward for you, but the reward comes at a cost. You need money to make money. We all know this, particularly in the finance space. I'm going to award each minister here, this is fake, I want to emphasize that. I'm going to award each minister here $1 million to spend on climate mobility in a way that your community needs it most, and potentially in a way that might leverage additional funding. That's the reward. The cost is that you have to tell me how you would spend that money in one sentence, and only one sentence. If you add another sentence, you will no longer receive that money. So,
I broke my checkbook by
Minister, maybe we can start with you. It just top of mind, really.
So my sentence is long. There's no full stops, no commas. No, for certain, because of climate change, heat, I would have to say that I would spend that money on a basic necessity for one or two of my communities, which is for water.
Okay.
They have water supply, but we need to have potable water.
Okay, Mr. Jiang, you can write that check, please. Thank you. Madame Minister, please, one sentence.
Merci. Donc, pour ma part, mon million de dollars, je vais l'orienter directement vers les communautés, sans intermédiaire, parce que c'est des communautés qui souffrent d'une finance insuffisante, d'une finance complexe et qui n'arrivent pas à temps. Donc, si j'ai les moyens, ils les auront dans l'immédiat.
Parfait.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Merci. I think that's the perfect way to end. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you for playing my game. I really appreciate it. And I'll turn over to moderators.